much do we really know about the ancient life of this planet? If you look back into the history of the cell when it was just single-celled, I guess, the behaviors that it learned over time are pretty astonishing, given its absolute change from just prokaryotic single-celled living with free-floating DNA within its cytoplasm to eukaryotic multicellular beings who have been out to space. When we take this massive leap into consideration, it is typically attributed to the idea that cells banded together in order to survive other more predatory cells. But could there be more to that? An idea has emerged in the last couple of years that when we compare some cellular behavior with other organisms on Earth, such as viruses, there appears to be a lot of shared traits between very specific cells. So looking further into that, is it possible that viruses themselves have influenced cells to become what they are, and with that, where does this influence stop? The reality is emergent behavior has already been noted in viruses prior, which now shifts some to think that viruses may actually be living and have actual goals and responses to their environment. This brings us actually around to today's topic. In the events of sinners, way down in the deep south of Mississippi, where it's nothing but 95-degree heat and 100% humidity, and every time you step outside it sounds like that harmonica being played because of the heat, you know the one, an Irishman would appear on a doorstep triggering an outbreak of vampirism. However, the question is, what is exactly causing this, and is there any biological reality associated with the combustion of vampires in the daylight? Actually, believe it or not, I think I found something. And it makes a lot of sense. So stick around to the end because that's where I mostly discuss that. But in today's episode, we are going to do it old school as I want to try something. Up on screen is a timestamp, and that's where you can get to the actual science of the vampires and what they may be infected with. Click that to jump ahead or just use the chapters. You know, those are easy too. Otherwise, we're gonna run through the summary first in case you actually haven't seen the movie yet. Also, it was a good movie, so if you don't want spoilers, well, by now it's been somewhat spoiled. Anyhow, moving on.
He's gonna take you back to the past.
We kick off today's story with the information that there are legends of people who bridge life and death. Healing brought to the communities along with horrific things, evil things. As a car rolls up, I'm like 64% sure that's a Model T. It could be. Honestly, my knowledge really just stops at the greatest era of mankind, the 67 Impala, which speaking of, I don't know if this was intentional in this movie or not, but I swear, the way things are said and done, it feels like a call out to Supernatural. I have no idea why, but it just is what it is. A man named Sammy, looking a little rough from the night before, shows up for church on Sunday. Standard young man activity. The pastor then sees him and calls out to him as he approaches. We see one guy pop up, which will be important later, and we're jump scared the holy hell out of that because I was not expecting it. The dad then tells him to leave behind his sinning ways and then drop the guitar. He's injured pretty good on the side of his face, as then we jump to one day earlier. Don't worry, bro, that's gonna be a 6 scar later. Also, I bring in here, last video, everybody told me that, well, not everybody, obviously, that would be a little bit ridiculous, but a lot of people said that they were unsubscribed from this channel. They don't really even know why. I have seen lately YouTube kind of screwing with things really bad on this channel, so if you want to check to see if you're subscribed because you want to be subscribed, feel free. Also, if you like this content, subscribe. It's been slow around here, I don't know. So as he's gathering the crops early that morning, the rest of everyone else comes out to start work for the day, as he's been out there for a while to get his quota. Heading home, he cleans up before heading into the house, waking everyone up. Going to grab his guitar, it's gone, as the two Jordans wait for the mill owner at the production plant, or the mill, I guess. A man then gets out as everyone is strapped. Showing them the mill, he asks what they even plan on doing with the place, as they disagree if they are interested in it or not. But making the deal, they settle on agreed upon terms, and then we jump back over to Face Injury Man from earlier. I have no idea why I kept calling him that when I originally wrote this, but again, it's gonna look cool as hell one day, bro. Trust me. He showed up to get his guitar from his dad and forcing him to read the scripture first. He says he wants to be free for one day, as his old man tells him if he keeps dancing with the devil, one day he's going to follow him home. Jumping in the car with his cousins, Smoke and Stack, they head out of town to start getting everything they need for tonight's party. They talk about how everything up north should have been better, but really, since they just came from there, it's the same as down in the south. Completely disillusioned as they had just fought in World War I, they expected to come back and live a better life, but it's just business as usual in the country. Clearing away the brush from a truck, a rattlesnake then gets got after making a leap at them as they talk about how they need to split up, which I need to clear up something on my Instagram story. I ended up asking a snake if it was poisonous. I know it was venomous, but I was focused on trying to figure out what kind of snake it was. Everybody in the comment section of that was like, oh, bro, it's a king snake or a rat snake. It was not. That was a rattlesnake. It had a rattle on its tail. I believe it's like, what do they call them? Diamondbacks? It had diamonds on his back. It was a rattlesnake, 100%. I should not have been close to that thing. Anyways, one brother watches from the truck as then one goes down in town with facial wound to get more supplies. Taking off, the other brother then drives the truck as they pull into a small town, and this is Mississippi, which I imagine everyone is sweating to death given that they are all dressed in heavy clothing. Smoke then asks a random girl to watch the truck and alert him if anybody comes and messes with it. Entering a store, Smoke then starts asking around and then says we need a ton of catfish as the horn goes off, finding two men raiding the back of the truck who apparently didn't hear the horn going off. That's pretty bold of them. One man then catches around straight to the popliteal artery. Kneecap shots are not safe. The other man then catches around to the knee as well, as then he heads in and pays a shop owner for the catfish, but he also needs a sign painted as well as Lisa goes to get her mom. Alright, so I know it's tangential, but it has to be this way on this channel sometimes, so I'll keep it short. You have massive veins and arteries all over your body. There is an age-old adage of like, oh, well, just aim for the legs if you don't want it to be lethal. That can be absolutely lethal. Like, let's extrapolate out on that. Let's say you hit him in the thigh. Well, your femoral artery is like right there. The shockwave sent out by taking lead to the thigh can actually cause the artery to shear and rupture, leading to a bleed out. Okay, so what about the knee? The popliteal artery runs right behind it, and it's like the smallest area, so any part of the knee that you actually hit, you have a chance of hitting that. Also, the shockwave is just as dangerous if you don't outright hit it. The best place to maybe possibly aim if you aren't even like, you have to be a really good shot, is like the foot or the hand. That can be sectioned off during a bleed out event by a tourniquet. Otherwise, you're probably just likely to end up bleeding out in 100-degree heat in Mississippi from a leg shot, as you would with a center mass shot. I mean, not completely, but still the odds are against you on that one. Basically, don't do something to get shot, and if you do, make sure to section off that area. But Roanoke, how do we do that, I can hear you asking? Well, I'm here to tell you. Take your shirt and get a stick. Wrap the shirt actually around your leg, and then use the stick to twist the actual shirt tighter and tighter. This will apply steady pressure. Do that until the bleeding stops, and then get to a hospital. If you have a belt, a similar process can be done. Actually, there's a better chance with a belt, and now you know. And knowledge is power. Anyhow, so Grace then walks over as Smoke asks for the sign as we jump back over to Sammy and Stack, and they're talking about pressure specifically applied to certain areas of the human body, that and theory and politics. Now look, the Cairo is just one of 300 geosync platforms. That Mac gun could put a round clean through a Covenant Capital ship. Ask your dad as to what they're talking about, or your mom, depending on if your dad is like a cool guy or not. I don't know which. I'm not explaining it to you. So as they talk about Smoke and Stack's dad, apparently that dude was a complete chode. He continues on by telling him the guitar is from someone famous and asks if Sammy actually knows how to play it or not. And yes, he does. So problem solved. Also, he can sing the blues, which you should pay homage to the blues, even if they aren't your thing, because without it, we wouldn't have classic rock, which means we wouldn't have Kansas. And that's just not a world I want to, not the state. Driving through Kansas sucks. The music can by Kansas, it's pretty good. Anyways, without Kansas, that's not a world I want to live in. Heading into the town of Clarksdale, a train is arriving as Stack and Sammy then roll up on a guy named Delta Slim playing the harmonica, which, again, is the same sound that plays every time you step out into the Alabama sun right now. It's so hot out here, I had to use it twice. Yes, someone from Texas is going to say it's hotter there, which true, but I've been in y'all's 110-degree heat. It's dry. Come to Alabama, where it's like 100 degrees, but humid as hell. You'll suffocate. He then laughs at Sammy, asking what he knows about the blues, as this is something that comes with age. It's true, you do have to have a certain level of, wow, you know what? The tapestry of life is a bit of a nightmare, isn't it? Stack then makes a deal with Delta Slim to come out for $20 that night, as he asks if they're going to be there the next night, though, because he's a little skeptical. Or even the night after that. Enticing Slim with an Irish beer, he agrees to the deal, as Stack then tells everyone about the place they are opening tonight. A woman then starts looking at Sammy and walks over to talk to him. She claims to be the devil's mistress, or married, I can't remember which, as then she walks off. Another woman is staring down Stack, jilted lover sort of scenario, as she's there having just buried her mom yesterday. So she tells him to rot in hell, as he's like, yeah, I will, as then they both nope out of there. Jumping back in the Model T probably, they pass a chain gang, which upsets Delta Slim, as he says he knew all those guys. They got busted for vagrancy, but they could play music, which ended up saving them from further issues. Delta says everything they made, he drank all of his half of the money. His friend actually took out the rest of his half to start a church, but ended up paying for it as he was caught with it, trying to board a train even though he earned it, and then the people lied about him. These were very brutal times. Back over in the fields, he goes to meet a man named Cornbread as he upsets him with his offer, but ultimately, Cornbread agrees to bounce the, juke that they call it. Meanwhile, Smoke then heads back to where his son is buried and drops off some flowers for him. I guess it's his son. It's never really actually determined. A woman then comes out asking if he came alone, and then asking him why he came back at all. He talks about how the juke that they are opening is going to be a big deal. Walking inside, a couple of younglings then buy some stuff and leave as Smoke goes to give her money. It becomes a discussion of how there is nothing more out there, just power and money. He asks why, if more existed, it didn't work on their offspring, which she says she doesn't know. He hands over the mojo bag to her, and then she goes to make a new one. She asks again why he's there, as he loves and misses her, so much like hitting up an ex-girlfriend, we all know how this goes. They're alone in a cabin together. Jumping ahead, headed back in the truck with his ex, everyone then starts loading up to head to the juke that evening to get everything going. Elsewhere, as the sun goes down, a man is running who is just absolutely burning. Banging on the door, he concocts a story about how he thought he could trust the Native Americans, but as he continues his story, they tell him there are no Native Americans around here for miles. He starts crashing out about his dead wife as he sees sheets in the background. Yes, I don't think YouTube will actually let me say what that actually... You have eyes. Anyhow, the Navajo show up as they say they are in pursuit of a man who is very dangerous. He asks if he's in there with them, and he tells them not to let him in their home, as the man then says, nope, we need to get out of here. Realizing it's too late as the sun is going down, they head out, as apparently these people don't want their help anyways. Heading to the back, calling out Bert's name, he doesn't answer. Opening up the door, he sees the man from earlier covered in blood as Bert then stands up, as she's told not to cry. Damn vampires. Over at the juke, they get the power running to the mill as the man then walks up to pay for his beer and almost gets thrown out because he doesn't have enough. Smoke is not there to bargain prices, and meanwhile the Devil's Mistress has showed up as Annie then tells Smoke they got to feel wanted in there if they want to make it. Sammy then walks off with the Devil's Mistress because if she is married, this is a pretty messed up situation. Cornbread lets in the woman as two others then walk up as he's owed $2. The Devil's Mistress asks if Sammy is going to play, as then he spots Mary from earlier and tells her that he's with the twins, as he says she should leave before they see her. She grabs him and then drags him over to the bar as he looks old enough to drink now. She asks if he makes money with the guitar or what. Smoke then walks up to tell her he sent her mom plenty of flowers to smell while she was still alive. What's cooler than being cool? Stack then goes to grab Mary to escort her out as it becomes Lover's Quarrel Part 2 post-funeral fun time boogaloo. Say that 3 times fast, as she talks about how she waited and all that, and you know how it goes. He claims he just wanted to keep her somewhere safe, which is a bit of a cop-out there, Prometheus, as then he walks off. Guess you can just hang out at the party then, huh? Alright. Slim continues playing the piano as he wraps up his set and calls out to Sammy, telling him to come up on stage as he starts singing the blues immediately, but he's like, hey, wait, no. You gotta tell him who you are and where you're from. Sharecropper from Sunflower Plantation named Sammy, which is quite the alliteration. As he begins singing, things then start going absolutely wild as several different eras of music and people start materializing out of nowhere. Delta Slim then talks about the magic in the music as we get the voiceover about how spirits can be conjured from the past and future. Also, the roof is literally on fire. And as the embers rise, the whole place is now seemingly burnt down as 3 people are beta orbiting the perimeter. So if you haven't noticed by now, this movie has both supernatural elements and corporeal ones. About 80% of this can be explained through bona fide science, but in some cases, it literally cannot. I don't know how you conjure spirits from the past or future. It would obviously have to do with the fabric of reality, which humanity just doesn't know at this point in time. It's always like I like to say, if you built a time machine and bring someone from the Middle Ages to now and show them everything we have, science actually looks a lot like magic when we don't understand it. And the reality is, we do not really know everything there is to know about our fabric of reality. There is still much more to learn in this universe. So approaching the mill, we jump over to the Devil's Mistress and Sammy, as apparently she walked there. Sammy is wild for this. Moving on, Stack comes over hearing Sammy as he's being summoned by Smoke, and outside, Cornbread sends another guy to summon Smoke and Stack as they are discussing how they are running out of money in about 2 months at the current rate. While the people outside, an Irishman and the 2 jackwagons from earlier asked to come in, Smoke and Stack arrive to see who these people are as they question what they are even doing out here in the first place. They start singing about picking Robin clean and jaybirds and whatnot. I'm not gonna lie to you, absolutely a stupid song if I'm being serious. They sing a song later that's like, bro, why didn't you lead with that song? That would have got everyone hyped. Smoke then tells them to just keep moving on as he asks, well, can't we just be family for one night? As he just kind of walks off slowly with the other two, saying that he will be there just in case they change their mind. Smoke gets them to leave faster as he goes to pull the handheld on them, and they ask if they should get the trunk, but Mary says it's just the three of them. Smoke then says not to let them in as everyone is continuing to dance and drink. So you may be wondering what that response is. Well, it'll all become clear soon, so don't you worry your pretty striped head. Sammy then talks with Smoke as he says this settled it and he's gonna go off on his own out to Chicago. Smoke has a plan for this area, but he says if he's gonna go somewhere, he tells him to go down to Mound Bayou, not Chicago. Smoke then tells him this is his last juke that he's ever gonna play tonight, which upsets Sammy. Stack and Mary continue to share a real will they, won't they, as Smoke then pulls a handheld on Sammy like, my man, you are brandishing that thing way too much, especially with everybody drinking. Cooler heads prevail. Mary then heads outside to talk to the Turtastic trio as they are singing sweet nothings, meaning very little, I suppose. Then again, I listen to the blues, but not really whatever the name of all that is holy this is supposed to be, possibly because I live in the US, I'm not from Ireland, I'm assuming, so. Maybe we just don't jive with the same music. I think I have like 3 people from Ireland who watch this channel. If you saw this movie, is this truly what you guys are listening to over there? Mary then goes and sits with them as they hand over solid gold to pay. The leader of this dork band says it's from a different time as he talks about her internal pain and how money can't fix it. He then talks about how he knows that her mother, basically was having issues, and she's like, yeah, my mother actually just passed. He claims he could have saved her from that fate. He says everyone needs saving as his eyes turn red and then he starts drooling. Not a good sign. She pulls the force multiplier on him as she turns her back to him as she walks away like an idiot and gets immediately jumped. See, if someone's sporting red eyes and drooling near you, and you're like trying to get away, you probably want to keep that person in your line of sight the whole time. Just a word to the wise. Inside, the Devil's Mistress starts singing as Mary then heads back into the party. She asks if Cornbread is going to let her in, as then she walks into the party, and Delta Slim watches the door while Cornbread goes to bleed the lizard. Mary then gives the money to Stack as she starts making out with them as Smoke then watches the party from above. Cornbread, meanwhile, runs like 12 years away to take care of business, which, my man, this is like the guy in every horror movie who's camping and decides just to take a dump, he needs to walk like a full 100 yards into a dark woods to go do this. Like, same exact vibe. Hearing someone asks if that's Cornbread, he keeps peeing. Look, I get it. No shy bladder detected here whatsoever, but if I'm gonna go pee and in the woods I hear, is that Roanoke? I almost said my real name. It's gonna be like, yo, I'm just gonna walk back. Screw that. I'm gonna pinch that off and start running. Back in the party, one guy was caught cheating at cards as he says he just wants to be allowed to leave. No shot. Stack then starts thinking with the downstairs head as Cheater then starts getting stomped out while Stack notices that Mary is drooling as he starts getting absolutely eaten up in the back room and not in a good way. Obviously. Smoke then sends Sammy to go get him, but he comes back with him saying, I'm not gonna mess with that, as Smoke then heads back there asking where Cornbread is. Smoke enters and finds Mary going absolutely ham on Stack. Lining up Mary, Stack's carotid has been pierced, as Mary says they are all going to kill them, as then she runs outside. Attempting to stop the bleeding, there really is not a great way to do this, but there is a possible way. Essentially, you need pressure, and like a lot of it. Now, safety should come first, more so if you don't know someone, but sometimes you really just do not have time, so you gotta be prepared for potentially any bloodborne pathogens and their consequences that could be passed to you, that could come later, just being absolutely real here, but essentially, you need to apply heavy direct pressure, preferably with some gauze over the wound. And once you apply it, you literally cannot stop. You cannot use a tourniquet, obviously in a traditional sense, because you're just gonna cut off blood to the brain. And if you keep pressure on it for too long, you could actually trigger a cerebral ischemia. And this is when the brain doesn't receive enough oxygen and the brain tissue could actually start dying within 6 minutes because you need, even though you have another carotid artery on the other side, it's not gonna be able to perfuse the brain adequately. So even if you do stop the bleeding, you are incredibly limited in what you can actually do. Essentially, you are applying first aid to a situation in which it is highly likely the outcome is going to be grim, even if a medical team arrives in time. But without intervention, the alternative is they will bleed out typically inside of 30 seconds. So basically, Stack is smoked. Witnessing that, now your brain isn't going to be operating at 100% at this point, and Slim is then sent out to keep everyone out as he tells them the party is over, and then everyone heads outside where those things are. Smoke then laments that he could have stopped it, which no shot, brother. She was pretty much already on his neck by the time you saw any of this. There is no way to stop that unless you were at a hospital, and even then, chances are it wouldn't work. And he then says that they need to move Stack outside immediately. because he's going to get back up. Though Smoke can't handle that information at this point in time, Grace then tells her husband that they need to get out of there as the deal was to help them with the party, not help with this. She tells Bo to go get the car as then he walks out there next. Annie locks up Stack as the Devil's Mistress comes over to ask Sammy what just happened. Cornbread now shows up as Smoke is pissed at him, asking what happened to him. He asks to be let in as Annie then asks why he's asking to be let in as he accuses her of using bad grease to cook with. But the reality is she didn't use bad grease to cook with, at least according to her. Cornbread also still hasn't walked into the room as he says they should be kind to one another as Smoke says something isn't adding up. Cornbread then turns back and says, can he still get his money? Dead or alive, this man wants to be paid. Being the bro that he is, Smoke goes to give him his money as then he puts out his hand and gets grabbed by Cornbread as he tries to bite him. Smoke then pops him before he can as half his face is now missing. Ouchies, which will be, that's actually, I'm going to explain this later. So running back inside, they shut the door as Slim has completely crapped his pants. Hearing a knock on the door, a knife then breaks through as Smoke goes and looks. Don't put your eye near that. Stack then says he lost a lot of blood, but he's okay now. Annie says she checked his pulse, and the man that's in there is not his brother. Stack then starts yelling as he continues to ask to be let out, as Sammy looks through the door next as Stack then breaks through it. The garlic burned him as Annie informs them these are not haints, these are actually vampires, which arguably, probably worse. Annie then tells them vampires are worse as their souls are stuck in their body, and as a result, they know everything about one another. Either a stake to the heart takes them out, or just sunlight. Slim then says he will protect everyone. Okay about that. Annie then informs Smoke that if she is turned, stab her through the heart. Finding a body, they then drag that outside as in the distance, they can see the Irish vampire singing as everyone from the party has been turned. Also, probably not ideal. See, maybe had you played this instead of that stupid Jaybird song, they would have let you in, because this one actually has substance and it kind of slaps. Back at the after party, everyone decides they need to figure out who's infected and who isn't. The Devil's Mistress says she doesn't like the taste of garlic. Nobody likes the taste of pure garlic there, gal. And they tell her if you refuse to eat it, we're gonna have to kill you. So finally, she does. Slim then eats it next as he starts having problems as he says he drank too much, so his stomach is all messed up, but he does choke it down. Checking the blood pile, they realize it's actually probably just vomit. The guy from earlier that they pulled out because they thought he was infected now sees Cornbread approaching as he tries to get the door open. Bo approaches, telling Grace to come with them. Not seeing the man getting eaten alive over there, so he's probably gone. Bo then comes back and says they can head home to Lisa. Irish Vampire then tells them the world already left them for dead, so why not just join the Fellowship? Sammy then tells him he's the devil, which look, complete supernatural vibes is all I'm saying. As then the vampire's like, "Aw, Sammy, I'm telling you, Yellow Eyes Demon." What was that, like season 2 or something? It's been forever, dude. Anyways, Irish Vampire then says everyone here is going to come get them. He then informs them the man they bought this place from originally was actually coming back to take them out anyhow. Now it becomes basically just vampires trying to convince humans to join them, a tale as old as time itself. Stack then tries to tell them that this is the way, immortality and whatnot, and how he can't do this without him. Grace is crashing out at this point as Smoke asks for a second to think. Grace is ready to open the doors and start trying to kill everyone. So everyone approaches once again, singing about jaybirds and picking poor Robin clean, as Grace starts crashing out harder than ever, and she yells for all of them to come in. Well, now we don't have a battle plan, and it's about to become a barroom brawl. Throwing a Molotov cocktail, it becomes a massive fight as everyone attempts to infect and also not be infected. Basically, this is infection mode where there's like 3 people left. Annie then gets bit by Stack as he takes a round and Smoke goes over, but Annie has in fact been bitten in the carotid. Smoke then goes and stabs her as Stack and Mary retreat out of the building for some reason, seeing this as Slim stays behind, cutting his arm to attract the vamps. As they run in, Irish Vamp then screams, "Sammy, I'm telling you, Yellow Eyes, it's all there." The Devil's Mistress gets bit as Sammy then jumps out the secretory window, immediately hurting his leg for sure, as Irish Vamp is on his tail. Smoke and Stack engage in a perfectly symmetrical fight as Irish Vamp then talks about how he wants Sammy's stories and songs and how he's going to have basically all of that. Reciting the Lord's Prayer, Irish Vamp then starts doing it too, showing that this is very likely not evil, but an infection. Smoke and Stack continue to beat the hell out of one another in a perfectly symmetrical fight as Irish Vamp keeps trying to drown Sammy, as Stack then goes and bites Smoke, but or goes at least to bite him, but he's overpowered. Smoke then goes to stab Stack. Good lord, this is alliteration, but it doesn't appear that he can do it. Sammy then is completely tired of hearing all this nonsense as he hits Irish Vamp with the guitar, embedding a large portion of it in his head as Smoke then shows up to stab Irish Vamp. As he does, everyone experiences the same pain as the sun starts rising and everyone erupts into fire, turning into ash. Lastly, the alpha vampire becomes a fire tornado, and then he is gone as well. So now that it's morning, heading back into the mill, they unload the trunk of force multipliers as Smoke tells Sammy to bury the guitar, as Stack actually lied to him about the origins of it. It was basically just his dad's. So they hug it out as Smoke says he has business to handle. This leads us back to the current time frame when Sammy made it back to the church. Smoke rolls a cigarette because this man is just fueled on adrenaline at this point, as it shows a montage of the day before things didn't suck so bad as they are, terrible right now. Taking off the mojo bag, he locks and loads Brides of Christ as the man who sold him the property from earlier shows up and he starts taking everyone out. The door is locked as Smoke starts sniping dudes, which he had such a great spot. He should have just kept sniping them. This was like the best spot. At this point, it becomes about wiping out everyone who showed up to take him and his brother out, but he was hit in the side during the fight. The main guy who sold him the place has also been hit as Sammy then goes to put the guitar down as Smoke has his cigarette, but he's bleeding out pretty quickly, so he falls back. As he does, he sees Annie and his offspring, which, whoo man, some of this needs to be blurred out. Reaching out to them, he then lights up that one guy, ending his whole career, as then he goes to hold his youngling. Sammy doesn't drop the guitar, as now we jump over to 1992, the year where I was born. Not where, when. Where an old man is now playing guitar and he still has that sick facial scar. As he wraps up his set, he sits at the bar as a man then tells him someone came to see him as Mary and Stack walk in. As they sit next to him, Sammy just kind of asks how. Stack tells him that Smoke couldn't take him out, so he just kind of kept living. I guess so. He's infected, not undead, and as a result, well, he did die, but as a result, he lets Sammy live as well. Sammy doesn't have long, so if he wants to keep touring and keep living, Stack offers to bite him and change him into a vamp. Sammy says he's seen enough of this place, which means he's basically ready to check out and he doesn't want to be a vampire. The guitar from Stack and Smoke's old man is still in Sammy's possession as he sings the blues. Stack pays him as he then hugs him and they both nope out of there. Sammy then tells him he wakes up paralyzed at least once a week remembering that night, but that night was one of the best nights of his life, and then Stack also agrees it was his too because that's the last time he saw his brother alive. Now they nope out of there and thus concludes Sinners. Okay, so as we have seen, there are several instances of biological information, specifically, I think, relating to virology, as there should be, understood there's some supernatural elements here. But the combustion at the end, I believe, is a very natural, although exceedingly rare process, and argued to this day as if it's a real situation or not. So let's break down just what exactly is going on in Sinners, if there is actually any real science to it or not. But let's be real, this channel is going to make some science, because it has to be this way. I believe and other chronic illnesses like lupus, which essentially means your immune cells become self-reactive and begin attacking your own tissue as they were not destroyed by the thymus during the selection process. But these endogenous viruses are a relative unknown as to what they are, but being as large as like 8% of the human genome, we need to take a look at the thought process. If they affect us to this day as a macroorganism, could they affect cells individually? And the line of thought is yes, that actually may be how all of this even started. What do I mean by that? You, me, complex multicellular life, fertilization methods, all of it. It's really no doubt that there are similarities between sperm and an egg that brings to mind the same process is actually seen time and time again with viruses. Viruses will forcibly enter a cell and implant its genome. Specifically with retroviruses, its information is disseminated to alter the cellular behavior, at least to a degree. A sperm attached to an egg and disseminating its own information to alter the behavior of that cell is exceedingly similar. And this is why an idea is beginning to emerge that ancient endogenous viruses invaded cells and ended up causing what we know as reproduction to actually begin. It could have literally been because viruses wanted to continue their own genome, and within the cell of the cells that they invaded, it became somewhat of a known that when that organism died, so too did the virus. By invading specific areas of multicellular organisms, the gametes, the virus could actually secure its own survival, and by doing so, it may have altered the behavior of those gametes to become what it is today. Now, take all of that with a grain of salt because it is in no way confirmed that this is the case, and there are still several issues to overcome, like how multicellular organisms would have reproduced prior to what they may do now. Like, is this intentional? Would this actually be an emergent behavior within a virus species? Who knows? And with that, we can apply this idea, though, to maybe other areas of this infection. A virus, like any other form of life, despite not appearing alive, wants to continue on reproducing and surviving. We have known this to be the case since we first discovered them causing problems in human bodies. Because of that, what sort of form might this take? Well, to this end, this is how it relates back to the vampires. These vampires appear biologically infected with something. Is it rabies? No, it's not rabies. If they were purely supernatural, they would be evil, right? And if they were evil, then one would think that they would shy away from anything considered to be holy like the Lord's Prayer. Because of this, at least to me, confirms that this is an infection taking place that has pushed them to become what they are. And with that, areas of the brain must be subdued through what is known as electromagnetic coupling, and that appears to be taking place on a level that, unless broken from the one who infected you, you will continue to behave in a way that would turn you into a seemingly mindless vampiric zombie of sorts. But what does this look like exactly? Well, as we look at these vampires, we see a few things quite clearly. First, the eyes begin to change, appearing more red and with the corneas affected in what would be a detrimental way. This is symptomatic presentation of a very specific illness, which we will talk about here in a second. Another thing to note is that the teeth become more pointed, allowing for them to bite and tear flesh. All of these things can, for the most part, be biologically accounted for and chalked up to an infection. Even the teeth, they would have to super grow the teeth really fast, but let's just assume for the sake of argument that this virus is able to do this. But where it kind of strays off is super strength, as we would call it. Humans are capable of doing that, but being able to jump tens of feet into the air with specifically the Irish vampire, that is purely supernatural, as that amount of strength actually does not reside within the human form. So let's stick to what humans are capable of. When first infected, it's clear what happens at first is you drop and then you're reanimated. When this happens, a virus, potentially the endogenous virus, similar to a megavirus containing millions of base pairs instead of just a few thousand that we see in today's viruses, is injected into your bloodstream. As you are now infected with these viral particles, which are much more complex than your standard virus and carry way more genetic information, because of this, they can code for different structures in the human body. The thing to remember and frame this as is that vampirism in this universe has been around since the beginning, like the infected ancient man, and it coincides with humanity talking about these creatures since forever. A line was generated who contained this infection, but it never became truly widespread. Interestingly, this may be why man actually went out during the day and sequestered themselves in caves at night, not only to hide from predators, but also to prevent the literal caveman vampires outside from getting to you. And this allowed for humanity to continue in their Homo sapiens form and not be wiped out by vampires. Because after all, a caveman vampire approaching a caveman human asking to be led in the cave is probably going to be met with aggression rather than the pleasantries of today, which means they would just have to move on before the sun even comes up and burns them alive, which again, I do have a biological thinking to this end as to why this exists. So as the virus infects a person, critical structures are changed, but I believe, for the most part, this to be kind of a symptomatic issue. To behave as such, it's clear this virus would be neurotrophic to a degree. In the form of aggression increase, this would affect areas like the amygdala, which is known to increase aggression in those who have it damaged. However, I don't think that these areas are actually damaged. Other areas like the frontal lobe associated with decision making and impulse control would be subdued, allowing for the person to run off just pure aggression and begin attacking others rather than behave in line with what their humanity would typically steer towards. Along with this, the hippocampus would become involved to prevent the emotions associated with a memory. What you essentially have is a person who remembers everything about their previous life, but their decision-making abilities are hampered and their aggression is increased. And with a virus circulating in their bodies, because I do not believe them to actually fully bleed out, they're able to infect others. But how exactly is the bleed out prevented? Well, the virus appears possibly to code for quite a few things for this to work properly. First and foremost, apart from acting on the brain, the clotting factor in the body would be heavily altered. When Cornbread actually takes a shot to the jaw, he bleeds for like a moment, but this sort of hit should have had him bleeding all over the place for an extended period of time. Because of this megavirus infection actually seems to code for stronger platelets that are able to prevent bleeding on a much better level. So career-ending injuries are now sealed up as soon as the air touches them, which prevents the death of the vampire. And this is why I think a stake to the heart still kills them, as they can still technically bleed out. The heart still needs to function in order for the body to survive, even with the virus present. And this indicates, once again, this is an infection and not the undead. Of course, bleeding out initially would indicate that the heart still has some blood in there, but it did stop. The virus may have restarted the heart using the sinoatrial node and essentially shocking it, sending it into rhythmic contractions once more. And this would actually keep the heart moving, and with platelets in place, this would keep the blood that they still have actually in the body. Now, the blood pressure would be dangerously low, so it's very likely almost every vessel in the body would have to be contracted essentially in order to once again allow for any amount of pressure to build up. And this may be why vampires are regarded as being like very cold, like almost room temperature, and why they also look pale, because every capillary vessel, whatever, is contracted to keep the blood circulating in the organs and brain, and really just completely starving the outer areas of the body. As the infection continues to progress, these initial areas are the most important aspects of keeping the vampire alive. However, with the brain subdued, but given once the bond is broke with the original vampire, their humanity somewhat returns and they are back in control, this would indicate that likely the virus also codes for new neurotransmitters in the brain. It does not so much damage the brain, but it is altering its behavior, and this would subdue the aforementioned areas that we have discussed, and then allow for the next and potentially most important part to take place, which is, as we have talked about, electromagnetic coupling. Electromagnetic coupling is essentially when two electromagnetic fields sync up, so to speak, and impact really kind of one another. It is known that the human brain has an electromagnetic field, and in relation to human telepathy, there may be some truth on the matter. Depends on who you ask. Although way more study is needed in order to really understand if this is true or not. But according to declassified CIA documents, which, hey, just the S tier sources to pull information from, right? The CIA would never say something crazy to kind of throw people off their scent, but it appears as though some humans may have the ability to utilize telepathy and even possibly use astral projection. Now, that is a topic all its own, but the idea runs in the vein of if humans could electromagnetically couple to one another in the human brain, the brain could understand what another person was thinking by firing in a similar pattern. And this is what I believe is happening in the Vampire Lord and the Minion situation. The original vampire has a viral coding for specific neurotransmitters that alter the brain in several ways. One of these ways may be making the brain more open to a form of hypnosis, which, as we know, requires several areas of the brain to be subdued and other areas to actually communicate a little more in depth. And this can leave a person under the sway of another person through the power of suggestion. However, given when the Irish vampire is stabbed later, and then everyone reacts as if they were stabbed, this is electromagnetic coupling, which would be much stronger than just the power of suggestion. It would physically impress upon the minds of those who've been bitten the electromagnetic field of the one who bites. This could be due to the fact that the virus itself wishes to exercise control over those it infects, as a downstream effect could happen, and depending on how out of range you could actually gain freedom, but in the immediate area of this alpha vampire, the virus, in order to propagate and not cause infighting between hosts, has an infector version of the virus that for one reason or another is able to control the infected version of others. So this would highlight that this virus, similar to viruses that have been seen already, would have a pattern of intentional behavior, which sounds weird, but that's actually your human ego talking. Look, if you take a look at your cells right now, like let's say a precancerous cell is behaving a little strangely, a T cell will literally tell it to end it. It will go up like, hey, big dog, I see you're making some weird proteins. I think you should end yourself. And your cell will typically oblige and undergo apoptosis. A virus controlling another version of itself is not from the idea of, oh, you're lower than me, you have to listen. It's from the idea of, I am me and you are me also, behave this way. It's no different than your neurons of your brain telling your arms and legs to move. Those are cells responding despite being in a different area. The virus, with its larger genome, would behave in a very similar manner, making it more similar to complex cellular life. So now that we have that established, we need to continue on talking about the physical manifestations of symptoms, as I think this will support the idea of physical combustion is not just like a supernatural aspect, but something that might be, corporally, if that's a word, kind of expected. Given that this is a blood disease and then continues on to the whole aspect of a body disease, I believe what we are seeing is what humans have been talking about since forever and is even associated with vampirism in the past, known as porphyria. Porphyria is a disease that is incredibly rare and comes in essentially two forms: genetic porphyria and secondary porphyria. Of course, there's like other versions of it, but genetic porphyria is nothing more than a genetic disorder where the body's ability to produce heme, which is the red blood cells used to carry oxygen, is disrupted as that copy of the gene is damaged in some way. And this leads to issues with the skin and nervous system as a result. With the skin, the main one is going to be actually inducing light sensitivity, presenting as blistering and fragility. Now you're probably thinking, but Roanoke, blistering is not ignition, and you are correct, but we will get there momentarily. The other form of porphyria is kind of what I want to focus on, and this is called acquired porphyria, or as it's known, secondary porphyria. And this version can be acquired through things like infections, which is critical to understanding how this infection progresses. Porphyria is identified by the porphyrins in the bloodstream typically. Porphyrins are ring-shaped organic molecules, often with a metal ion, that play crucial roles in various biological processes, including photosynthesis and oxygen transport. They are essential components of molecules like heme, which is in hemoglobin. With porphyria, this will actually build up in the bloodstream, which can actually in many ways affect the brain's functionality, which further lends credence to the disruption of the standard neurological activity in the brain, potentially explaining why people are behaving as such. But the route I want to take with this is something known as a ROS, or reactive oxygen species. Porphyria is known to change the corneas and iris of the eyes to a degree and actually lead to skin and nervous system issues through disruption by a breakdown in metabolic processes. But the most intriguing aspect is the accumulation of porphyrin precursors like delta aminolevulinic acid. This accumulation will actually trigger oxidative stress and overwhelm the antioxidants of the human body. Porphyrins are also known to interact with sunlight and iron, and as a result of that, this will actually generate these reactive oxygen species. But you might be asking, okay, so if they generate reactive oxygen species, who cares? Well, because the reactive oxygen species don't just like hang out, they tend to love reacting with things. It is known that reactive oxygen species can actually react with lipids, in particular unsaturated fatty acids in cell membranes, resulting in a process known as lipid peroxidation. This can actually lead to cell damage, which further, kind of induces a chain reaction of issues, but under normal conditions, this would not do what I'm about to suggest, but a bunch of vamps running around isn't exactly a normal condition, is it? One of the things you might not know is that organic peroxide, which lipid peroxidation causes, is highly volatile. Organic peroxide can be formed by ROS reacting with fat. This is typically what is used to explain spontaneous human combustion, which is fairly strange. Essentially, a heat source is introduced to the area of the human body containing a high amount of fat. It is believed actually there was a woman who fell asleep with a cigarette that she was smoking. An ember landed on her. She didn't wake up, and it ignited a fat store in her body, producing the wick effect as she burned to a crisp due to the fat reserves that she had. This same idea can be applied here, as the reactive oxygen species due to porphyria caused by the bite, which in turn creates a mass of reactive oxygen species, continue flooding the body. This in turn causes way more of a buildup of this organic peroxide this is well beyond the standard of any disease or even what would be found in the body. The skin fragility and sensitivity causes the barrier to sunlight to not be as robust, which then allows for organic peroxides to begin absorbing sunlight. Now, also, it should be taken into consideration, remember, just a minor amount of electricity is actually made by neurons, which also could have an effect on the fat source. So as this happens, at least with the sunlight, this is going to begin to generate heat rapidly in a runaway heating cycle. And this goes from just feeling a little warmer to smoking to outright combustion as this process continues. And as a result, it doesn't matter if you're standing in water, you will still combust all the same as the sunlight hits you. That's right, your boy just explained vampire combustion. Anyways, so now there are some supernatural aspects to this movie, however. Not sure if you noticed, but at the end, you cannot actually see Stack or Mary's reflections in the mirror. And when Sammy sits down, you can't actually see his either. But evidently, his is going to relate more to the idea that he sold his soul to get good at playing the blues, which is why he was kind of connected to the supernatural from the drop. Though, this is just speculation, but I couldn't see his reflection. With the vampires, this is just kind of a well-known thing that you cannot see their reflections. They just don't produce one, which is a little ridiculous because here's the issue with it. If the photons are coming off their bodies and our eyes can detect them, then the photons coming off their bodies would strike a mirror and then enter our eyes where we could see them. So that is just purely supernatural. That is the only thing that can be explained there. But there you have it. I hope you guys enjoyed a return to my older style of video. Actually, let me know down what you thought about this in the comments. I'm really interested to see if you guys prefer this over kind of the newer way I made it. I like writing this way also. It kind of makes it seem like 2 videos, but it helps me stay focused on the science portion a little better. But anyhow, I do want to thank you guys for watching. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, Roanoke Tales, and Roanoke Games link in the description. And speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. At the astronaut tier, we have Bananas Are Epic. Thank you, sir. At the astrophysicist tier, we have Death Dancer. As always, thank you, man. At the full-fledged scientist tier, we have Dakota23, Frank Shaftcrank. I actually love electric cars and the anglerfish. That's what that guy's called. 67 Impala and non-anglerfish FTW. Invictus Echo, Medieval Weevil, Metric System, Official Texan, and Stutz. Thank you guys for your awesome support as well. And the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all. Your help goes a long way towards keeping everything running, so thank you. But all right, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.